Hey, all you lovely people in the digital world, welcome back once again to another episode of Spliced In Later, the place where we talk about movies and TV shows in a very not competent manner. And we won't beat around the bush with this one, we'll get right into it because the movie's been out for a bit, so this will probably disappear into the YouTube algorithm anyway. But we are reviewing Killers of the Flower Moon, the newest epic movie from legendary filmmaker Martin Scorsese. Here on Spliced In Later, I do my best, but we tend to mainly review and talk about big blockbuster stuff or sequels, prequels, reboots, very specific genre of stuff. Every now and then I'll make an exception for a favorite director of mine or for a word of mouth. But for the most part, if you think Spliced In Later is the place to come to get all your information about all the movies that will eventually be nominated for Academy Awards next year, you might get lucky on one or two instances, but for the most part, not really. I do my best to keep up with that stuff. Eventually, I do watch it. Sometimes it'll be years before the movie won an Academy Award before I get around to watching it. You could argue that for someone who wants to do a podcast about movies, that's probably not good. But hey, that's me. But for a lot of very specific filmmakers, very specific things, I always want to catch them around the time everybody else is. You know, your Oppenheimers, your Parasites, your Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Tarantino, Christopher Nolan, Martin Scorsese, Ridley Scott, Greta Gerwig, you know, those sorts of things. So with this one, Killers of the Flower Moon, I believe it is the hot topic to take home all the Academy Awards next year. It'll be this or Oppenheimer, or maybe Napoleon. I'm not sure. I have mentioned Martin Scorsese here on the past, only because he comes up a lot when I'm talking about the stuff we normally talk about here on the show, mainly Marvel crap. Scorsese has made a lot of comments about Marvel movies, which are often misinterpreted. I don't think he is dissing Marvel movies per se. I don't think he's poo-pooing on the actors and the directors and everybody who works on them. It's more the clout, the crunching of cinema as a whole. We're living in an age where independent movies or movies with original ideas tend to not get enough of a release in theaters, get dumped on streaming services, or just die at the box office because they're up against big behemoths like Avengers Endgame or Justice League or Star Wars The Force Awakens, or even Barbie and Mario, all of those things that are IP brands. So it's not necessarily Scorsese going, yeah, Iron Man's trash and Robert Downey Jr.'s trash. It's more because there's so much Iron Man, there's not enough room for anything else. And I think that's fair. Sometimes he phrases it doesn't sound exactly right with the point he's making. I myself, back in the early days, were like, what are you talking about? Ooh, boo-hoo, Martin Scorsese. Understand that cinema can be for all people. But I get it. I understand that. On the other hand, I disagree with his belief that movies should take up an entire day. Scorsese is notorious for very, very long movies. His last movie, The Irishman, didn't even go to theaters. It was a Netflix film. It went straight to Netflix. That movie was 4 hours, possibly under. I believe if you round up, it was about 4 hours. His argument there being, people can sit at home and watch 4 hours worth of Friends and Brooklyn Nine-Nine, just back-to-back TV shows. So they should be able to go sit down and watch a 4-hour movie. But the difference with that is night and day. When you're watching 4 hours of television shows, it's broken up into episodes, meaning you get breaks, you get moments for your brain to reset and then jump into the next thing. For a 4-hour movie, you do feel like you have to pay attention to every inch of it because it's such a behemoth of a story. You're going to miss certain parts. And there's no bits where you feel like, okay, I can take a break, I can stretch my legs, I can go for a pee. At least in the olden days, you got your intermissions. You got to get up, walk out of the theater, have a chat, and go, yeah, I'm getting ready for that second act of Ben-Hur. But now it's, nope, you sit there for an uninterrupted stretch. Don't buy that extra large Coke. Don't drink anything before the movie because you're going to have your bladder and kidney explode if you try and sit through this movie. Am I alluding to the fact that that's the game plan I had to take when going into Killers of the Flower Moon, a movie that is not quite 4 hours. Okay, I'll be fair on that. It's more 3.5 hours, which isn't saying much. And you substitute 10 minutes off that for credits. So it's not as big of an Irishman sit, but it is something which I'll say going into it, this movie will not be for everyone, not because of the content or because of who's in it or anything like that. It's just time. You have to find a big enough chunk in your day to see this movie, and if you want to see it at the theaters, that's going to be hard. There's limited screenings, not because there's not enough real estate. Scorsese, like Nolan and Tarantino, gets that real estate in theaters. They get people to come and see him because they know that there's going to be an interest there. But you can only show an almost 4-hour movie only so many times in one screening, in one cinema, while also making room for other theaters and things. So you have to have the time to see it, and you have to be in the mood for it. This isn't a movie where you can go, oh, I'll check it out, and if I get bored, I'll just tune out or something. This is something that requires commitment, both watching and investing in the story. Or not even an investing in the story. You don't really need to know what the story is going in, but you have to accept going to see something like this. You will have quite the experience watching it, but you have to be in the right mindset to do that. So just getting all that stuff out of the way. If people want me to talk about, Scorsese runtimes are ridiculous, or what he said about Marvel movies, or are movies too long or too short, or anything like that, it's not really what we're going to do here. I'm getting all of that out of the way with my 2 cents and all of that, just to talk exclusively about the movie Killers of the Flower Moon. Is it any good? Would I recommend it? Of course, absolutely. Martin Scorsese is one of the best. I was having a discussion with my friends before this movie. One of my friends talked about, does Martin Scorsese do the Oscar bait movies? Absolutely not. An Oscar bait movie are those movies designed, manufactured at a corporate level to be an Academy bait movie, where the Academy will eat up something like a biopic about a struggling person whose real life that people can remember and relate to. Your Freddie Mercurys, your Elton Johns, your Elvis Presleys, your Abraham Lincolns. And they especially love when an actor becomes that person. Rami Malek becomes Freddie Mercury. Daniel Day-Lewis becomes Abraham Lincoln. Or the real life stories of hardships overcome. The Spotlight team that outed sexual deviancy within the church. DiCaprio surviving in the wilderness after being mauled by a bear. All very good movies, but designed with a purpose to be, this is a movie that we want to be at the Academy Awards. Scorsese just gets to be at the Academy Awards because he just knows how to make epically entertaining, engaging, engrossing, powerful film. Regardless, it's not like he's making these films with the intention of getting an Oscar. It's a byproduct of being Martin Scorsese, I should say. And he absolutely nails it with this movie. It's not my favorite Martin Scorsese film. It's not my favorite Leonardo DiCaprio performance. But it's right up there with some of the best movies I've ever seen, about some very, very heavy, intense subject matter from a dark point in American history. Absolutely validates the 3.5 hour runtime, because you are absolutely, if you allow yourself, mesmerized and engaged by this movie. Let's give you a brief plot idea of it. Killers of the Flower Moon. It's based on a book. Don't ask me who wrote it. I don't remember, and I don't really care enough to look it up. It's a non-fiction book about a very dark moment in American history involving the Osage Nation. I apologize in advance if I get any wording wrong or anything like that. This is a subject matter that me, as a privileged white fucker, doesn't really understand. I can appreciate how terrible it is, but the reaction that I could have to it will be vastly different to how other people will feel viewing this movie. But if you don't know the history, that's understandable. I read somewhere that it wasn't even really taught in America, kind of like Tulsa, where it was just sort of swept under the rug, only now are people hearing about it. The Osage Nation was Native American people who discovered oil, struck oil, in essence struck gold. They all became rich and wealthy. And basically, the white people, the white Americans came in, and systematically butchered and murdered them and took their money and their lands and their wealth and virtually got away with it for ages. These atrocities, these terrible things they were doing to these people before eventually what would become the FBI came in and went, hang on, hey now, what's happening here? This seems a bit insane. We better do something about it. Our movie essentially follows Leonardo DiCaprio playing Ernest Burkhart, who is not a good guy, not a bad guy. I mean, he does bad things, but he's the most pathetic person that DiCaprio has ever played. Just this sad sap of a man who's under the thumb of his uncle, played to perfection by Robert De Niro. But basically, he comes to the town to shack up with his uncle and falls in love with a Native American woman, Molly, played by Lily Gladstone. He courts her, they fall in love, they get married, all of that stuff. And then around them, Molly's family, her sisters and her mother, start dying. They start disappearing, they start getting strangled, decapitated. All these horrible things are happening to them. Molly as well starts getting desperately sick due to diabetes. And as it stands, while all this terrible stuff is happening, Robert De Niro's grip on the town, his wealth, his power, is getting better or more sinister. And DiCaprio gets involved in that somehow. He gets pulled between those two things, but for the most part, he is just the most snivelly little pathetic piece of shit in the world. Eventually, Jesse Plemons is almost our white knight character in this movie from the Bureau of Investigations, not quite the FBI yet. He comes down, does some investigating, unearths what's going on, brings down the hammer of justice to an extent. There's never a sense that anyone really gets punished or justice is done. It's very matter of fact in just how things just didn't work out for the Native American people, how the white people got away with all this shit, how everything just sort of petered out. Now, it sounds like the plot is like, okay, whatever. But the execution of it is insanely engrossing. I did a little bit of research. According to the webs, the book is written kind of like a mystery. So the author, I believe, was one of the investigators coming down to figure out what was happening to the Osage Nation people. And then the book is written with him uncovering the clues to figure out who is doing the killings and what he pieces together to eventually serve some sort of justice to these people. For the execution of the movie, the mystery is thrown out the window. From the very beginning, you know exactly what is going on. You know who these people are who are committing the violence, and you know to what extent it reaches to all the players involved. There's an opening moment in this movie where one character says to another character, well, it's getting late, I'd better take so-and-so home. And you're like, oh shit, he's going to murder that person. It's not even a sense of, oh, who actually did it? Is it going to be a twist to reveal that there was a secret conspiracy out there? No, it's very matter of fact. This is what's happening. It is being done. You don't need to think very hard about it. Now you might go, oh, okay, well that sort of ruins that mystery and the pacing of it then. What justifies its almost 3-hour runtime? It's not the mystery of who did it. It's the trying to understand the why of it all. To see these people commit the violence and the atrocities, all for greediness, all for money, all for wealth, and understanding why they have done it, what drives them. Because there are multiple players involved. There's the people at the top who are giving the demands for the murders and the deaths, but aren't necessarily getting involved themselves. They're the messengers, the errand boys, the ones who are setting things up to happen, but also not committing the murders. And then there are the actual people who pull the triggers themselves and why they did it, what the motivations were there. Was it money? Was it insurance? Was it sadistic psychoticness? The answer is yes, everything. So what you get out of it is sort of just seeing these people, the lengths that they'll go to fuck over the Osage Nation, to get the money, to hold on to their power, to out-weasel each other as well, because everybody's sort of working with each other, but only to an extent where it benefits each other. DiCaprio's character is probably the only one caught up in this whole thing who doesn't have some sort of nefarious plan of their own. He's involved, but he's very much manipulated. He's pushed in certain directions. He has no spine. He has no backbone to do anything himself. Absolutely pathetic in every sense. Everybody else, it's like, oh, okay. Everyone wants a piece of the pie. Everybody wants to exploit these people. As such, a lot of what you see is hard to watch. It's not Game of Thrones style violence for the sake of violence. It's not grotesque. It's not upsetting in squeamishness. It's just coming to terms with the brutality of what a human being can do to another one for essentially wealth, for money, for greed. It's truly upsetting. And you see all these people do these things and kill everybody and getting away with it for so long. And you just feel dirty. You feel trashed. You feel so sad. It's good that you can feel those things because it means you've got the empathy to understand that this is wrong. And hopefully we can learn from this shit. I mean, if we look at what's going on in the world right now as I record this with the bloody war crimes and genocide and everything going on in the Middle East, the ongoing war in Ukraine for Russian bullshit, one could argue that we're not any better than what we were before. But stuff like this outlines the truly vile nature of humanity back when it was just deemed completely fine to do that because one race was superior than the other. Talking about the performances, as I said, DiCaprio's performance is not my favorite, but maybe that's just because of his character. He does very well at making me hate him. So I guess he does a good job. He's doing the whole DiCaprio thing where he's sinking into a role. He's a class act. He's doing something with his jaw. It's kind of like Marlon Brando's myth that he was stuffing cotton wool in his jaw for The Godfather. It's actually a really cool quirk, which I didn't realize until as I was watching it. It makes his jaw all stiff, and the movie takes place over a long period of time, so it gets more pronounced and juddy-outy or whatever you want to say. But this mannerism that he talks of where he's like going, that really only comes in when he's lying, when he's feeling guilty, when he's scrambling to get out of a situation. So it's an interesting mannerism that gives you a highlight into exactly what Ernest's feeling is about all this shit going on. People are saying De Niro is giving the best performance he's given in years. I don't like when people say that. It's sort of undermining anything else they've done before that. And De Niro did The Irishman. He did The Intern. He's done some good shit. I will say it's the most un-De Niro-y performance I've seen. We're used to him doing his gangsters and all of that. His piece of shit white set man here is upsetting, but in a very... It's amazing how charming you can be while being absolutely evil. And he loses himself in that role so much. When he first appeared in the movie, I didn't even know it was him. Once a zoom in went in, I was like, oh yeah, that's De Niro. But from far away, when he first opened his mouth, his mannerisms, how he was standing there, I'm like, holy shit, that's De Niro. That's pretty good. Some supporting players in here. Jesse Plemons doesn't get that much to do. He shows up about halfway through the movie. He's very important to the story. But it's not Jesse Plemons shining in the role or anything like that. He does a very good job. John Lithgow has a very small role in here. Brendan Fraser has a very small role in here. Scott Shepherd as DiCaprio's brother. But I want to give special props to Lily Gladstone playing Molly, the wife of DiCaprio's character in here. Without a doubt, she's one of the few characters in here which is likable, who you root for, who you desperately want to get out of the movie alive, to realize what's going on around her, and to one-up these people. But since the movie is based on real life, really, she never really gets that moment to fight back and take down her oppressors or anything like that. So instead, what we are given to is just almost 3 hours of this poor woman's suffering, losing her family, seeing people around her, her people, her nation, violently dying and no one caring about it, while also getting sicker and sicker with what is supposedly diabetes. Having diabetes myself, I can attest that I'm very lucky that I live in this time period and not the past, because I would have died. So that is completely overwhelming, her mental state, her physical state. But there's always an essence that she still is fighting. She has a need to solve what's happening to her family, to have justice be done. And for what it's worth, I do think the romance between her and DiCaprio is legitimately real. I never got the sense that DiCaprio never loved her and was using her for money or anything like that. And I also never got the sense that she stopped loving him even as she realized certain truths about him as it was going on. It felt real enough. I liked that, but I really think, Lily Gladstone, I don't know if I've seen her in anything else, but just the suffering, the portrayal in that for this whole thing is just upsettingly good. It's really powerful stuff. So if you want to see this movie and someone says, DiCaprio is good, De Niro is good, all valid points, but go see this and check out Lily Gladstone because she is great. Direction-wise, Scorsese absolutely kills it. It's a different type of Scorsese movie to what he normally does, which is why it's not my favorite movie that he's done. Not just because it's some heavy stuff, which, makes for fun viewing, but his style has always been very quick pace, fast, really, really snappy dialogue, non-linear storytelling, which is why his gangster films work so well. Your Irishmans, your Casino, your Goodfellas, that sort of stuff. This is much more matter-of-fact performance-wise, even to a point where at the end, the resolution is shown through like a stage play, like an old-timey true crime podcast. And I guess you can't, because the material is so real and visceral and upsetting. You can't have your characters telling jokes and swearing and doing all the Wolf of Wall Street stuff. But that's a testament to his directing skills, that he knows how to tell this story in a way that justifies it. It's enthralling. As I've said before when I've talked about how movies are too long, with stuff like this, like John Wick, for example. John Wick 4 is a great movie. Doesn't need to be almost 3 hours. With something like this, I'm always sitting there going, all right, what could have been cut out? What could we have trimmed down to get it to a reasonable length? But honestly, watching this film, I'm sure there are moments where I'm like, that doesn't have to be in slow motion. You don't necessarily need to hold on that man's face for as long as you're doing. But you start tinkering with that stuff, the execution of the storytelling, and you lose a lot of the presentation, of the impact of things you are watching. Yes, this scene might be slower than what you're used to, but it's really letting you stew and understand and appreciate what's happening in front of you, allowing you to embrace it, disgust from it, all of that stuff. So I honestly can't say that this movie shouldn't be as long as it is. And the runtime, it didn't feel it for me. I didn't feel like I was checking my watch going, okay, I wish this were over. The movie naturally went from point A to B to C to D. It was never felt like it was spinning its wheels. We essentially told one part of the story, then we moved on to the second organically. And I was having an incredible viewing experience. I can't say I had a good time, but it was an enjoyable movie experience in the manner of appreciating a well-executed epic story. Honestly, Killers of the Flower Moon, I give it an 8 out of 10. I would give it higher, but in terms of rewatchability, I don't know if I want to rewatch it again because of the stuff around it. It's a movie that you need to have the time to watch and the willpower to watch. So for me personally, there are quite a few other films this year that I would rank higher than it, not because they're better. By all accounts, Killers of the Flower Moon is probably the best made movie of the year for me. Maybe Oppenheimer is fighting it for that position. But there are a ton of other movies which I would enjoyed more and would rather see based on personal preference and all that. But definitely a movie worth seeing. If you're a movie aficionado, check this one out. If you're looking for a good movie to see, this is definitely an experience. It's not for everybody, but it's one of those ones where when someone says you should see it in a theater to get the theater experience, yeah, it makes sense for something like this. Please don't be one of those people that arrives late to the movie and talks as you find your seat and crinkle in your little papers while the quietest scene in the world is happening, because you are a fuckhead and you're ruining the viewing experience of everybody else around you. If you're going to be one of those people, wait until it's out. You can watch it at home and have a chat about which sports team is going to win the grand final that weekend, while absolutely terrible stuff is happening in front of you because you're just not willing to accept and appreciate the film for that. There you are. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed. I'm glad that I saw this, and I'm glad I was able to review it for you. Due to personal reasons, I won't be giving you an episode next week. Just some stuff going on in my life at the moment. Nothing terrible, but stuff that will absolutely prevent me emotional-wise from just recording an episode as per usual next week. So you get a little bit of a break from me for a week, and then I'll be back next week for a standard episode before we kick back in with some more reviews. We've got the Marvels coming, the Hunger Games, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Good stuff coming. So be sure to stick around and check that out. Just not next week, because I won't be here. Well, listen to my other content if you want to do that. Do whatever. But until I speak to you next, thank you all for listening. It means the world to me. You all know that. I love and appreciate you. You've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.